you? Welcome to What If I Say Yes?
Hi, Lucia. How are you?
I'm fine. So let's start with tell the audience who are you, Ines?
Oh my gosh, that's such a complicated question. So I'm Inéz. I live in New York, born and raised in Washington Heights from a Puerto Rican family. And currently I live in the Bronx with my husband, my two dogs, and I'm excited to chat with you.
Good. Um, so now tell the audience what is it that you remember of how we met?
Oh my gosh. I was in college
Uh-huh.
and I got assigned to work in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences admission office. And you were there already. And you quite literally took me under your wing. And I think I was like a sophomore. So I was such a baby in terms of like what you should do when you work in an office. And you just like taught me a whole bunch and we became like friends over the summer. And now it's like so many years later, and somehow we're still in touch.
Yes, I was reviewing my emails just to see. So it was back in, well, I started working at Fordham. It was Fordham University. Prima Wilson offered me that job. It was a part-time job. And I think I started in 2009 because I then got pregnant.
Yes.
And then I just remember traveling from Jersey City all the way to the Bronx. Like it was the PATH train and then the subway and then buses. And when I was pregnant, I was like, oh my goodness. But what made it all worthwhile was the people I was working with. You, one of them. And according to what we emailed each other after I left that job, um, we used to have a lot of fun.
Yes.
We laughed a lot. We told each other jokes and stories, and so um, I found two. I'm gonna tell them here, but the
I'm kind of
jokes that you
scared.
later send me. Ah, even before starting this interview, we were already laughing. So yes, it's been a relationship that has lasted, that has, what's the expression? That has something that the test of time. What is
Has
the phrase?
has stood the test of time.
Has stood the test of time. It sounds like a trabalenguas.
Uh-huh.
A tongue twister. Anyway, so um we were in touch after I left Fordham University, and I think I sent you pictures of Maya. I found another email where um, we were going to go to Union Square to kind of see um, as many friends as we could and show them our daughter Maya, but you couldn't go because you were so busy. So I don't remember. Did you actually meet Maya in person? Never.
Mm-mm. But I went to your baby shower.
Okay. So
So I
you
met
were
her in the
there.
womb.
Yes. So maybe Maya in her unconscious remembers your voice.
Maybe. Maybe my laugh from the office.
So anyway, um, we kept in touch, and then I was very late with joining the new technologies and then joining social media, this and that. So I don't remember how is it that we found each other again and we connected now through WhatsApp.
I think you emailed me saying like, is this still your email? Uh, and then and I was like, actually, I'm terrible at responding to emails, so you should probably just text me. And I think that's true that I'm a lot better on text message than on email.
So now we're WhatsApp pals.
Yes.
So anyway, with all that history and all those good memories that we have of each other, I then said, well, Inéz, can I interview you for my YouTube channel? And you were like, yeah, well, let's wait a little bit. Let's
Because I'm always busy.
Yes. And you finally said yes, and that's why we're here today.
Yay.
So, Inéz, what is it that you chose to share today? What is that moment in your life when you ask the question, what if I say yes? You said yes and did something.
It was kind of tough, like picking just one. I feel like I have like a close tie between two. I would say like the first one was back in like 2018, my husband got offered a job in California, in Los Angeles. And every part of my body was like, this is crazy. Why would you move to California? But we like ended up saying yes. And we moved and we lived there for 2 years. And obviously, we're not there anymore. But I would say that saying yes to that was scary and like so worth it in the end. Um, and then I would say the second one would be like leaving my teaching career last year to still stay in education, but shifting to something else. And it's funny thinking about how we met and like that I was working in admission and I really liked admission as a student worker. That's what I do now for my job. And so it's funny to think that however many years ago, I worked in an admission office and now I can say that I also work in admission again.
Full circle with me.
Yes, for sure.
So now let's see if are these two yeses somehow connected?
Yes and no. I would say like yes, in the fact that like there were two times where I was like, this is kind of bananas, but I have to do it because I think I would regret it if I didn't. And then I would say like they're also connected in the way that I think had I not said yes to California, I don't think I would have said yes to like making this jump in my career. I think the experiences that I gained in California, the experience of living somewhere new and knowing no one, set me up for being a little bit more risk-takey in taking the leap of saying, yes, I'm going to apply for this job. But yeah, they're kind of connected, but not really. Like they're in two different spaces of time. I'm not who I was in 2018 to who I am now, but I think I'm like a firm believer that sometimes things that happened in the past happen for a reason and like you don't know why, but then you get to like this point later in life and you're like, yeah, that was why all of those other things happened.
Now, the move to California. I'm guessing your husband was applying to different places and included California. So it wasn't a surprise, correct? It was
It
part
was
of.
a surprise to me.
How did you find out? How was it that a surprise?
Because I always like, you know, you're always like looking at jobs casually, or maybe you're not one of those people. I'm always looking at jobs. My husband's always looking at jobs. It's no wonder that we're like married to one another. But he had applied for this job and hadn't said anything because he didn't really think it was going to go anywhere. And I remember it so vividly. I was like having a girls' night with my friends. He was having like a guys' night with like one of his friends. And he came back and I was like already in bed. He came home and it was late. I was already like half asleep and he's like, oh yeah, I'll talk to you in the morning. And I'm like, okay. And then I got up the next day and I'm getting ready for work. And he's like, so I have an interview for this job in Los Angeles. And I was like, what? Uh, and he's like, yeah, I just like, I thought I would apply and I didn't think it would go anywhere, but I got an interview. And I was like, I have to go to work. We will talk about this later. Um, and we will talk about this later. And I left for work and I was like, this is insane. And so he
What
did the
was the first
interview.
reaction for you? Were you mad? Were you upset? Were you surprised? Were you like, oh, what was it?
I was surprised. I don't know if I would say I was upset.
Were you a
I
little
was
bit excited?
not yet,
Not yet. Uh-huh.
not yet.
Okay.
Um, and so like later when we talked about it and he told me the job, I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. It was like to work in a children's hospital in like so my husband works in like the bone marrow transplant field, which is like a very niche community. And so I was like, oh, that's really great. And the more we learned about the job, I was like, oh, this sounds like really awesome. And I started to like do research. I like love to Google things. And so I was like, okay, like I'm gonna look at everything that I can find about this hospital. And then as he kept like going through rounds of interviews, I got like a little bit more excited and I was like, oh shoot, like this might actually happen. Um, so then I started looking at neighborhoods and I was like, this is where I think we should move. And you can take the metro to work because it's Los Angeles. And in theory, you should be able to drive.
Mhm.
But we didn't have a car. So
Mhm.
like I was looking for neighborhoods where we could take a subway and he could go to work. And then the panic set in for me where I was like, wait, what am I gonna do in California? And so then suddenly it became, oh, I'm going to leave my job in the middle of the year and move to a state and not have a job. And that was really scary. Um, but it was fine and it all worked out.
At that
But
time, what was your job?
I was a preschool, like a early childhood teacher at a private school here in the city.
So if you were
Um,
to try to do the same in California, would you need like a certification or different kind? Like, would they accept you coming from New York easily, or would that have been an issue?
um, because I had worked in private schools, the requirements there are less tied to like the state. And so in California, as long as you had like a master's degree in like education and like the amount of years of experience, I could apply for jobs. If I wanted to teach like at LA public schools, then it would have been a different scenario. But I've always really taught in the private school sector, so that was like an easy transition. I think the hard part was knowing that I probably wasn't going to have a job mid-year.
Mm-hmm. So now, from the moment your husband tells you, "Oh, and by the way, they're going to interview me for this job," to till the day you actually moved to California, how many days, months, weeks? What? How much time
Yeah,
did it pass?
I would say like about 3 months, and that was on purpose. They wanted him to start like a couple of weeks after he got the offer.
Mhm.
But I was teaching at the time, I was teaching like almost 3-year-olds. And so from like a child development standpoint, to just have a teacher kind of disappear from like one Friday to a Monday was really not ideal. And I didn't want to do that also to the school that I was working with. I
Mhm.
knew that it was hard that I was leaving, but I at least wanted to leave on good terms.
Mhm.
So I gave them a lot of lead time to say that I was leaving, and then I aligned it to be that my last day was when we were going on spring break. So that way, like, I could tell the kids, like, when you come back from spring break, there's a new teacher. And then they have essentially like 2 weeks to kind of like forget about me a little bit. So that when they came back, it was like, so it was like helpful for the kids. It was helpful for me. And it was nice to be able to have 3 months to kind of like get our lives together to move everything cross country.
What did you tell these almost 3-year-olds
I told them
about
that
you
I
leaving?
was getting on a plane with my husband because he got a job and that I was going to have a new home over there. And we talked about it a lot because they need so much repetition at that age. And they were like, well, are you going to be back tomorrow? And I'm like, no, I won't be back tomorrow. Um, and so it was like it was tough because then after I left, I was like, okay, I'm going to send them pictures of me not in New York. So hopefully they'll understand that I'm not coming back.
How did they react?
Uh, some of them were like a little bit sad. And then others were like, oh, okay. And others were like, I've been to California. And you're like, okay.
Uh-huh. And
Kind of
then
a mixed bag.
did you send pictures for quite a while after you moved, or?
Yeah, basically like through the end of the school year. So like from March through June, I did like send pictures from time to time and they put them in like the weekly newsletter that went to families. So they knew like where Inez was and that she was still thinking of them. And then like some of the moms like friended me on Facebook. So that was nice too to like keep in
Oh.
touch with them.
Mhm.
Even in like what year was it? Probably like 2020,
Mhm.
right before the pandemic started. One of my students came on vacation with his like moms and they were in Palm Springs and I happened to have been in Palm Springs, so we met up. Um, so that was really cute to see this kid that I had changed his diaper to now about to go to kindergarten.
Oh. Okay, so you did all this research, you move, and then what happens in this? Because being, I mean, I can only tell you that my niece, Valentina, who was born in New York City, raised in New York City, went to California for college. And then she said how much she misses, well, she missed, now she's back in New York, she missed New York. And there, well, she wasn't in Los Angeles, she was in Claremont, California. But she could feel like the thing that she missed the most was that in New York City, she feels like all the groups, um, ethnic groups, religious groups, racial groups, all live together. Um, I mean, there are conflicts, yes, of course, but basically you live your life in this city with all these people without having an issue. Everybody's part of the city. But that in Los Angeles or in that area, the groups were very divided. So it was
Mm.
the Mexicans or the Chicanos, and it was the African Americans or the whites, and she didn't like that. So anyway, I'm just thinking, having Valentina in mind, of how difficult it was for her to, I mean, she enjoyed the weather and she enjoyed several things about California, but it was kind of a very difficult transition. I wonder now, with you being born and raised also in New York City, how was it for you?
I mean, I definitely see Valentina's point of view. At the same time, I really loved the weather.
Mhm.
I disliked the traffic. And then the piece about like the people, it's interesting. I feel like in the 2 years that I was there, I can't say that I like made friends.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of maybe making friends as an adult, it's different. But also, I think in Los Angeles, because the traffic is so bad, it is really hard to make friends because if you're I was living in the Valley, I was living in North Hollywood. And let's say that by some miracle, you started talking to someone at a restaurant, and then it turns out like, oh, they live in Santa Monica. You are never seeing that person again because
Uh-huh.
the drive from North Hollywood to Santa Monica, number wise, you're like, oh, it's only like 13 miles away. Like, that's easy. No, that's like a 2-hour drive
Oh my goodness.
during like a peak weekend hour.
Mhm.
And so I think about like people dating in the city and how they're like, oh, I live in Manhattan and like the guy that I'm dating lives in Brooklyn. It's never going to work. It's basically that, but like multiplied in LA.
Uh-huh.
And so even like my coworkers, I ended up like teaching out there, and I had coworkers who lived like in Pasadena, which is like not that far from North Hollywood, and yet I never saw them outside of work. And nobody ever wanted to stay after work for a happy hour because the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take you to get home.
Mhm. So the people they befriend then are their neighbors?
It's like, I would say either they're native Angelinos, and so they already have friends,
Mhm.
or yes, you like befriend people in your neighborhood. And even that's really hard. Like my husband and I tried to go to like those meetups that you sign up for at like, let's meet up at a bar and like, let's catch up. And we did too, and they were so awkward that I was like, you know what? It's okay.
Why were they
So
awkward?
I don't know. It's like the people who sign up for these things, like, I know this is gonna sound so mean, but like, I don't think they're all like typical people. And it's a certain kind of person that signs up for this. And so me and my husband were like, what is happening right now? Like, we ended up in like a weird conversation with this woman who was like, my son had autism and I cured him of autism. Um, and as an educator, I sat there and I was like, yep, not engaging in this conversation today. Um, it was just weird.
Mhm. Is that an app? Like these meetups? How do you find out about them? Are there flyers on the street? Are they...
Honestly, I have no idea. I don't even know if they still exist. Like this was back in 2018. I feel like the world is so different. Um, my husband had heard about meetups, which is how we ended up like doing, it was like a game night one time. The other time was it was like a comedy show, but then the people were so dry and like they didn't laugh. It was weird. And so in a strange way, like as much as I loved Cali, I think it was a little bit weird. And I would move back 100% down the line. I would move back to Cali. I would just know that either we got to recruit some people from here to like move over with us, or I just know that me and my husband are going to become really close and we're always going to be flying back to New York to hang out with our friends, which is kind of what ended up happening the 2 years that we were there.
Mhm.
I think my husband and our relationship got really, really like solid because we had nobody else to depend on but each other. And
Mhm.
so even when we argued, it was like, well, you're stuck with me. Um, and now we're like married almost 8 years. Um, and then it was always coming back to New York for everything, which is I think part of why we moved back. It never quite felt like home. It always felt like we have to go home for the holidays, or we have to go home because someone's graduating, or we have to go home because someone's getting married.
Mhm.
And the year that we decided to move back, we didn't know that the pandemic was coming. We
Mhm.
just knew that that summer we were flying back for a wedding. We were flying back for 2 graduations. We were flying back for someone's birthday.
Mhm.
And we were like, with the amount of money that we're spending on round trip flights,
Mhm.
we could just move back. And at that time, like my husband was no longer working at the hospital. He had found a new job, not in another state, but remotely. And
Mhm.
so there was no reason technically for us to be in California anymore.
Mhm.
And so in like January 2020, we had said, okay, great. At the end of our lease, we're going to move back, which was like mid-March,
Mhm.
which if you're thinking COVID times, that was when like the everything hit the fan. And so when we moved back, it was like super crazy because we didn't even think we were going to be able to move back. Because there was like all this like talk. And so in the end, how I talk about how things always happen for a reason. I'm like, who would have known that us deciding to move back was the best thing? Because my parents and his family, they needed us to kind of be the youthful people to go grocery shopping so that they wouldn't get COVID. So not that I would have predicted that, but that's how it turned out.
Good timing.
Yeah.
So now, when you were in California, did you find a job? What did
Yes.
you end up doing?
When I first got there in like March, I didn't have a job, but I had coincidentally worked with someone like in the very start of my teaching career who moved to Cali and was working at a private school there as like a head of lower school. And so I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, I'm moving to Los Angeles. And I'm just wondering, like, you know my background because you hired me. What schools do you recommend I look into applying that kind of align with who I am as a teacher?" And so she gave me a list, and she was also like, "And if you need something now," she's like, "I could always use a sub." And so I was like, "Sure, I'll be your sub for the rest of the school year." And so I ended up like subbing in this like private school in, I don't even know like what the area is called. It was like in the hills of Mulholland. And even though it took me like 45 minutes and the amount of money that I was spending on an Uber was really eating into what I was getting paid, it was just something that I could put on my resume and something to do from like April to June. And it ended up like working out. And then while I was subbing there, I was also looking for next school year jobs. And then I got hired at like a school in West Hollywood, and I became a kindergarten teacher there for the fall.
And that's what you ended up doing until you moved back to New York City. Okay. So now thinking of that time and of those 2 years, what skills or what strengths did you come out with after having done that? That helped
I
you for the
became
next step.
I became very patient because I had a really long drive every day. I would say I think I like realized like, oh, I can totally do a really hard thing, like move to a state in a city that I know no one but my husband and like survive. Yeah, I think those are like two big ones. And it was just really nice to have the experience of teaching somewhere else. In a
How
lot of ways,
different
like
was it teaching in California than in New York City?
it's interesting. It was my like first time teaching in like what I would call like a campus school. Teaching in New York City, so many things are vertical, and kids, you don't play outside. You play like on the roof or you play inside in a gym. And then versus teaching in California, my classroom literally led right to the outdoors. And during recess, my kids were like, look, we found a worm. And I was like, right. Um, and that was something that I hadn't experienced before in the same way. On the rare occasion that it rained, it was like, oh, we have indoor recess. And that was something that I had never had to think about because all I had was indoor recess all the time. And so all of a sudden I was like, damn, what are we going to do with you now inside when you were so used to playing outside? So that was different in like a good way. And then when I moved back and I like started teaching at a different school, in the back of my head, I was always like, oh, it was so nice to like teach outside. And so then like not to like jump 7 steps ahead, but like the school that I work at right now is a campus school,
Mhm.
and the kids are digging for worms and like roly-polies and like other things under logs. And in the playground right now, there's like this like structure. And a robin has like laid her eggs in there, and the kids are all like watching for these like little birds to be born. And I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. And I wouldn't have known that I wanted that until I moved to Cali and taught there.
Hmm. Very interesting. So now let's explore this second yes. You come back to New York City, the pandemic hits,
Hmm.
you have to find a new job.
I had a job. So that was like,
You had a job to come back to
yeah,
as a
yes,
teacher still.
yes.
Okay.
So like in a weird thing, we had kind of decided, yeah, let's move back at the end of our lease. And I was like, okay, great. And so I just like started looking for next school year jobs.
Mhm.
And then I saw like a mid-year opening for this like preschool downtown. And I was like, what the heck? I'll just like send my resume. And um shockingly, I got like a phone call, and this was like before Zoom interviews were ever a thing.
Mhm.
Um, it's almost like we foresaw the future.
Mhm.
I was like, oh yeah, I'm living in Los Angeles. And so I had to like set up these like Zoom meetings
Mhm.
to interview with these people. And they literally hired me just on phone calls and these like virtual Zoom calls.
Wow.
And they were like, so when can you come? And this was like the crazy like leap of faith. I said, oh, I can be there in like 2 weeks.
Mm.
And so my husband, very supportive, he's like, it's okay. Like, I'm going to pack the apartment. You're going to go to New York with just a suitcase.
Mhm.
My parents still live in New York in the same apartment that I grew up in. And so they're like, well, your room is still there. You can just like stay
Oh.
there until, Raphael comes and you have an apartment, and then you'll like move in to your new space. But at least if like you not being in New York is going to keep you from getting this job, just like stay with us.
Mhm.
And so as a 30-something-year-old woman, I moved back with my parents for like a couple of weeks. My husband stayed in California with the dogs, and he packed our apartment. And I worked at the school for 7 days. And then we were closing early for an early spring break. And then we never came back
And how long did you stay there?
at
I
the
mean, with
school.
that job.
Up
So you never
until
came back in person, or you never came back at
we
all?
never came back in person for that school year. And so
But you started Zoom classes?
we started Zoom classes, and it was hilarious because I was like, oh, well, we just did this to hire me. So we're going to be all set. And that was interesting because I was working in a team of 2 other people. So it was 3 of us teaching Zoom. They had only known me for 7 days. The world is literally collapsing on itself. And we're like, yes, let's teach preschool over Zoom. What could go wrong?
Everything.
Everything. Everything could go wrong. Um, but it was, I don't know. We had like a really great chemistry. In the 7 days that I worked with the kids, we created enough of a relationship that when I came up on screen, I wasn't a total stranger.
You're like, hi.
Yes, remember me? I changed your diaper once. Um,
Memo-
um, Pardon?
Memorable.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I like moved back, I think the beginning of March.
Mhm.
And I remember because also like the day before the flight, I got a stomach flu.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh, I have to do this flight. And I'm literally like very unwell. So I remember going to like a city MD and I was like, I need drugs. I need whatever you need to give me so that I can make it on this 6-hour flight without like puking, without passing out, without being dehydrated. So they gave me a whole bunch of Zofran. They gave me like some other stuff. They gave me like a pill so that I could sleep on the plane because I was like, if I'm sleeping, I can't puke. Um, and I was like, oh God, I can't even like call out because like Monday is the first day of work. And I told no one that I had a stomach flu that weekend. And I just went to work and I prayed that everything that went in would stay in. And it was fine. And it worked out and I made it through the day. But it was crazy.
So now you were there 7 days in person, then you went online
Remotely for the
remotely
rest of 2020. And
of the
then
school
that's
year, of the year, the entire year.
of that school year. And then they also decided that we're going to offer virtual summer camp.
Oh,
And I was like, okay. And they were like, oh, you're our token Latina. Can you teach Spanish for summer camp? And I was like, okay, we're going to teach Spanish in summer camp. So all of a sudden I was like making all these like weird, like little figurines to try to teach the kids Spanish. I was making up songs. And I think from that, I have like an idea that down the line, I'm like, oh, I could totally turn this into like a bilingual children's book. Um, but
okay.
I had this like little osita and I named her Rosita la Osita. And every day we would dress Rosita la Osita for the weather. And that was how I taught the kids like sombrero, gafas de sol, falda.
What ages are we talking about? The kids?
These kids were anywhere from like 2 years old to like 5 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Um, yeah, and so
So,
and
and you would see the squares, and were the kids in the square, or were they just running around and then coming back, or
it
did
was
they
kind
ever
of
go black? Like my husband used to teach to this combination of people and then black squares because they were also in college. I don't know, they had permission to just show up but not turn on the camera. So with your kids, how was it?
it was a mixed bag. I had kids who were really into it and were right there. I had other kids who were not as into it, and their parents will put them in a high chair because they were like, if you're in a high chair, you can't get down. And then I had kids who were like just like here, and then they'd see something and then they'd be like, look, can I show you my umbrella? I'm like, wow, what a nice umbrella. But of course it would be in Spanish and I'd be like, es negra. I'm like, we're gonna try to make it educational, even though you are 3 and this is not what summer camp for you should be like. So we were just making lemonade out of very, very sour lemons. But it was fun, and I think I learned a lot about teaching virtually that I had never done before. And it was funny, like the things that preschool kids do on camera is like hilarious. I have kids who found their mom's makeup and are like on the camera like this, and they're just like putting their lipstick on, and you're like, okay. Or sometimes the screen would come on and like someone was dressed like a dinosaur and you're like, yep, it's Thursday. Um, of course you're dressed like a dinosaur. So it was in a time that was very dark, in a strange way, working with these kids was like a highlight because they were just being themselves.
How long did you have them on camera? Like with
That
The Zoom sessions, how long were they?
They were pretty short. I would say like at the most, maybe like 25 minutes before like we took a break and did something else. And then maybe a colleague would come on and teach music. And that was much more interactive. He used to play the guitar.
Mhm.
Um, he also like would use like pots and pans and would tell the kids, go into your kitchen and go find the pot, and
Oh
that's going to
boy.
become your drum. I'm sure the parents love this.
The houses were a mess after your classes.
Yeah, we did a lot of like, we did a lot of stuff. I read stories over Zoom. I did
Mhm.
sink or float. I worked in a Montessori program. The preschool is a Montessori program. And so in the beginning, when we were kind of like, well, what the heck are we doing? Because none of this is Montessori. I like did lessons on like practical life, which is like an area that's Montessori. And so I did a whole lesson on like teaching the kids how to wash the dishes. So I set up my camera in my kitchen and I had all these like fake dirty dishes and I was like, yep, get your sponge and we're gonna rub. And it was interesting because I was like, this is something we would do in the classroom, but now you're doing it at home. The kids are seeing my home, which was interesting because kids usually only think of you living at school. Um,
Now, this
and then
washing dishes session, was it you just showing them, or did you also ask them to be in the kitchen washing their dishes? They were doing that with
yeah,
adults around, I'm guessing.
yeah, for the most part. But it's funny, like the feedback we got from the parents were like, thank you for doing these things because you're giving us ideas of something else that they can do that's not just like watching TV,
Mhm.
that they feel really successful at.
Mhm.
And personally, they're kind of being helpful too, because like, who wants to wash dishes? Put the 3-year-old to wash the dishes, they'll do it. And it'll
Did you
take them
have a
20
laundry session?
minutes. Pardon?
Did you have a laundry session? Let's wash our clothes.
Oh, no, but we did do laundry sorting.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We taught them how to like sort from like whites to lights and darks. There was a lot of like practical stuff. We even did like cooking. So we're like, today we're gonna make a fruit salad.
Uh-huh.
We taught kids how to like, um, what else did we showed them how to like make a yogurt parfait. Um, and it was just like because we had nothing else. It was
But that sounds so much more fun than what my daughter had to do when she was in elementary on the computer. It was like
and what grade was she in?
mid fourth grade, fourth grade.
Wow. See, that's hard because like you're learning real things and doing it over Zoom is not ideal.
Yeah, no.
Preschool, not great over Zoom, but working in a Montessori program and finding all these like random things in your house that you could turn into a lesson was interesting.
It sounds a lot of fun. I mean, it was it was great. Okay, so now how long did you stay at this job?
I got hired in 2020 and then I left in June 2022.
To start your current job?
Yes.
So now
So
tell me, how was that transition of, now I want to do this other thing completely different? I mean, you didn't change. You're still in an educational environment, but it was completely different from what you have been doing for many years.
yes.
What went through your mind? Why did you decide to do this?
Yeah. I think like after COVID and even just like telling you all of the things right now virtually, and then when we went back in person, it was like so hard because I was teaching preschool with a mask on. The kids were wearing masks, and it felt like every other day we were shutting down because someone else got COVID. And it was so hard also because before vaccines were available, like I wasn't seeing my parents.
Mm.
Like I was doing the grocery shopping for them. And so what would happen is I would like shop for them and then I would take it over to their house. But because I was working in a school and I was so like high risk of having COVID,
Mhm.
I never like stepped foot in their apartment. I would just like leave the groceries like a delivery driver, like, yep, the stuff is at your door. And then I'd see them through the window and I'd like wave.
Oh.
And it
Mhm.
was hard because I felt like I was doing my part um to keep them safe, but then it felt like some of the families at the school that I was working at were not doing their part to keep everybody safe. And so like back when you had, if you traveled, that you had to quarantine for however many days.
Mhm.
I had a lot of families who were traveling, not telling us that they were traveling, and then coming back right after being away, which
Mhm.
then puts all of us at risk.
Mhm.
And it's like, I understand that you think that we're your babysitters, but also like so many of us are sacrificing real things
Mhm.
to be teachers to your children. And it would be really helpful if you were just honest
Mhm.
and said, yeah, you know, I did go to Turks and Caicos for Thanksgiving. And yes, I will quarantine for 3 days to make sure that we don't inadvertently spread COVID. And
Mhm.
so I feel like that combined with like virtual teaching and like that feeling, it just like broke me. And I was like, I don't want to be a full-time teacher anymore.
Mhm.
Like, I love kids, I love education, I love working with families. And also, I'm really ready to not be thinking about like, you know, did so and so like travel over the weekend? Or, oh, did so and so pack a snack because I know that they don't like this other thing?
Mhm.
And it was like time consuming to always be thinking about all these like worst case scenario things all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and so then like I was like, yeah, you know, and I was kind of over the current school for other reasons too, but um like I said, I'm always looking at jobs because I like to know what's out there. And I like was looking and I was like, oh wow, like there's a job at a school that's very close to where I live.
Mhm.
And it was for admissions. And I was like, I've kind of always done admissions in all the schools that I've worked in. A lot of times they use the teachers to interview kids or to run play groups. And it was always interesting to me. And then having worked with you at Fordham, um, I got to read like people's admission essays and see kind of that whole process of how you go from an application to like ultimately being admitted.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I'll just apply, and we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
But it's hard because I don't know if you know, but like a lot of private schools, they operate on yearly contracts.
Here
Gotcha.
it's every year you don't know if you're gonna get your job or not.
Correct.
Yes.
And so it's hard. And, you know, I see both sides of the coin. Like you keep people motivated by not guaranteeing that they will be back next year. And at the same time, it's really hard to live that way because, okay, let's say you feel really secure and you're like, yep, I'm going to be back.
Mhm.
But also, if you want to go for another job, depending on like what private school you're applying for, some of them have like almost like non-competes. And so if you've signed a contract with another school and you choose to apply for another job and they find out that you've already signed your contract with your current school, both schools are able to say, we don't want you. And
Yee.
so all of a sudden you're out of the job that you're applying for, and also you've lost the job that you've signed a contract for.
Oh my goodness.
So it's really hard. And then if you choose to say, I want to apply for another job, sometimes you have to tell your school that you're looking for another job. And as you can imagine, that can go one of two ways. Either they're going to be supportive of you, or they're going to be really angry at you that you're looking for another job. And then maybe you're out of a job anyhow, because they're going to say, you know what, don't worry about your contract. We just won't give you one. So it's like, it's so hard. And so you're kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place all the time, every year around the same time. So for me, it was hard because I was like, oh, I've signed a contract. And I would feel really stupid if I didn't apply for this job because A, I think I'm perfect for it. And B, it would make my commute so much easier. Like I was driving downtown to go to this other job, and this job is literally like 6 minutes away from where I live. So it was like, I can't not apply. And yet in the back of my mind, I was thinking, if this works out, how I'm going to get out of the pickle that I've put myself in.
And so you've been in this current job for how long?
This is like the end of my second year, basically.
Second year. How,
Yes, go.
how different or how did you have expectations going in of what this job would entail and how would you feel about the job that you would be doing, or did you come just ready for whatever was needed from you?
I would say like a blend of both. I think I had an idea of what I would be doing, both from like the job description that was posted, and then also the interviews that I had with the different members of the team. My takeaway was that it would be a really hard job with periods of a lot of work. And then there would be these moments of like a little bit more chill, like right now that I can like do this interview. But there are other parts of the year where like I'm working. I go home, I'll have dinner with my husband, we'll catch up, and then I go back to my computer and I'm working. And that's part of the school that I work in is like well known, and it's currently it's like a very popular place that people want to go to, and so that's why we have a lot of like people applying and a lot of people to interview. And so that's really fortunate because I feel like I have job security. I'm like, I don't think we're gonna not be struggling to find students anytime soon. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but I was excited for it because I had been teaching for 10 years before jumping into admission. But
So now you mentioned one beautiful thing about when we were talking about the differences between California and New York and this being in a campus. How do you did you call it a campus
like a
institution?
campus school. Yeah.
A campus school. So you have that here. But also you mentioned all these things that you think that you felt you were losing while you were a teacher. Did you gain or did you go back to the place personally where you felt now okay with your life and the relationship with your parents and your family and all the things you wanted to have, taking all those worries aside that now didn't belong to your job?
Yes. I feel like I think the world is also just different. Like now we have vaccines, and so I remember taking my dad because of like in the beginning the requirements were like either you had to be like a first responder or like an essential worker or above a certain age. And so like as a teacher, I fit in the essential worker category, and then my dad, because of his age, he fit into getting his vaccine like in one of those first groups. And we went together, I made our appointment, and like we waited online, and it was like the first time that we had like sat in a car together in like years.
Oh.
And then now it's just different because you have vaccines, and so, like, I see my parents a lot more often,
Mhm.
um, but I appreciate the fact that the worries that I have are much more different than, like, being in charge of a classroom every day and thinking
Mm.
about, like, weird things like, "Oh, did I remember to put so and so's, like, snack bin back in their backpack?" Or, like, "Did I cut out the things and did I leave them at the copier? Or did I put them in my backpack?" It's different, like, working in
Mhm.
admission, you have a lot of worries and a lot of work that you bring home, but it's different. It's, like,
Mhm.
administrative stuff, like,
Mhm.
did I write the report for so and so's interview? Or someone emailed me to confirm that they're coming for a tour in 2 weeks at 9 a.m. I'm like, "Oh, I have to reply to them."
Mhm.
It's like a different kind of mental load,
Mhm.
and I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, very nice. I feel like I went to California with you. And then I came back and then I lived through the pandemic with you. And now everything is fine. So it's a good time to now jump to the what if I say no moment. So tell me now a moment in your life when you said no. You thought no was a better option than saying yes. What did you choose to share?
Um, it's funny because I moved to California, I said yes to that. I would say, like, the year before, we said no to moving to London.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, my husband really likes to go for the home run all the time. And this one was, like, inadvertent. He was working for a nonprofit also related to bone marrow transplant,
Mhm.
and they were looking for someone to work in the London office for a month to kind of, like, get them up to speed. And at the time, he was in charge of, like, a department, and they were like, "I think you could bring some valuable insights and help the team kind of, like, become a little bit better."
Mhm.
So he went, and unbeknownst to us, there was, like, an opening at that office for, like, I think, like, a big department head. And within, like, a week or 2, they were like, "Oh, wow, like, he's actually pretty good at his job," and they were like, We think that you should apply for this." And I was like, "Here we go." Um, and I was going to go visit him in London because it was already summer and I was done teaching. So I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll spend 2 weeks in London and it'll be fun."
Mhm.
Um, but while I was over there, he went through the whole interview process and ultimately got the job,
Mhm.
which I was really excited for, and I think it was really well deserved.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that was hard is in terms of what they were offering. It was like a difference in pay, not for the better.
Mhm.
The cost of living in London is actually higher than New
Mhm.
York.
Mhm.
And when you look at apartments out there or flats, they're super small. And I couldn't fathom him taking a job that, while it was like a bigger role and it would look great on his resume, I was like, we can't move across to a different country for less money, for more expenses. And then for me, having taught in American independent schools, I was like, I don't actually think I'm going to be able to get hired in a British school in the way that we all think I might. And I felt like if we moved, it would be like stifling for me to try to figure out what I was doing over there.
Mhm.
And so it was, like, really hard on him, on my husband, because it was really me who was saying no. He really wanted to go, and he was like, "It's okay, like, we're just gonna eat at home every day, and that's how we're gonna make it work." And I was like, London is known for their food. I was like, we can't just not go out to eat because we're not making what we were here. Because also in my head, I was like, we're living off of his salary and not both of our salaries. So it was like a bristly moment in our relationship because I knew that when he said no, it was all because of me. And that is really hard to put your career desires on hold because of your significant other. But I like loved him for the fact that he respected what I was saying. And I think in his heart of hearts, I think he maybe thought, I'd like to think that he saw that I had a voice of reason, which was like, it is bananas to move to a different country for less money, more responsibility, and also your wife might not be able to get a job out there. And gosh, if we thought flying back from California was expensive, imagine flying back all the time from London. But that was actually, I think, why I felt more compelled to say yes to California, because this is like a year after him saying no to London. And I was like, I can't say no to him 2 times in a row. And California felt more attainable for me to like keep my career while also saying yes to something that he was excited for.
See what a beautiful patch we've made. So if you take a thread and a needle, it's Fordham University while you were a student, and then you were working at the admissions office. And then that ties with the current job you have. But then we also go to this no that actually facilitated your first yes to go to California. And you learn that, oh my goodness, I can reinvent myself. This is wonderful and stronger. And then you came back to New York City and reinvented yourself and are now in your current job doing something that California taught you was something you wanted, which is the outdoors and campus school. And no, it's like, if we teach all these stories together, it's like a beautiful flower of, it's wonderful everything that has happened to you in this period of time. It's a very colorful flower. It's a flower with a shape that I haven't seen before. So it's not a regular flower. And I like it. I like it in this. And it's a beautiful flower that allowed for the yeses and nos to be together and still blossom.
Yeah. Yeah, when you like sent me the prompts, I was like, and thinking it through, I'm like, yeah, I think this is like way more connected than probably maybe other people may have these weird connections. Or maybe not. I don't know. But it's worked out in very strange ways, and I'm thankful for it. But I also know that it's not per happenstance that all of this has happened. It's a lot of little choices that I think have gotten me to this point. And I'm excited. It's different. Like, I work in a school now, and like I'm trying really hard to get us to be more diverse, and that's something that's important to me.
So you don't have the token Hispanic kid.
Exactly.
That can teach the rest of the class Spanish.
Yeah, I don't want that. I want us to have many Spanish kids and many like Black kids and Asian kids, and yeah. And I want to help everybody afford private education if it is making sense to them. That's like my personal vendetta now. I'm like telling all my friends who have school-age children, like, don't just rule out private school because you think it's too expensive. I'm like, a lot of them have budgets to make it happen for you. And I'm like excited for that. Like, I just went to a conference where I got to like present, and then I also got COVID from it. But I got to present a whole workshop with like my colleague. We work in financial aid, and we talked about like an asset mindset to financial aid and not really thinking about the kids who you enroll on financial aid as, something that costs your school money, but instead really thinking about what are the value adds that by giving these students an award package, what can they bring to your school that you wouldn't have otherwise?
Mhm.
And that was like really powerful. And that's what makes me excited about my job, which is we're not just like giving money to diversify, but also more so than that, it's like there are things that you can bring to our community that we wouldn't have otherwise. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think. We have kids who have taught about like what they cook in their Nigerian homes and like have cooked that for the school. Or they like talk about the languages they speak at home. And I'm like, that's really cool.
Mhm.
And we wouldn't have that representation without these kids.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, final question. I'm just curious now to find out whether it was clear for you since the beginning that you wouldn't go into public schools to teach, or was that just it happened first in private schools and then you stayed there and you liked it? Was that a conscious decision, or was that a
Um, I don't think it was like a totally conscious decision in the beginning.
Mhm.
I think my mother would have loved for me to work in a public school because, they have a pension and you can retire and like you're set and you have a union. Um, but after I went to graduate school and I was applying for jobs, like public school is different because they really don't hire sometimes until the very last second. Like, let's say that school starts on like September 1st, for example.
Mhm.
There are some public schools who will not hire you until like August 28th.
Oh my goodness.
And so
Why?
it's because sometimes the teachers don't always let let their schools know that they're leaving or not coming back. Other times they just don't know if they have it in the budget to like hire another teacher. There's just a lot of red tape with public schools.
Mhm.
And so because of that, when I was in graduate school, I just started applying for private school jobs because that was what was open
Mhm.
at the time, which was like March, which is usually when schools are posting jobs.
Mhm.
And so I ended up hired at like a private school in Chelsea.
Hmm. I lived in Chelsea
Oh,
when I
did
was
you?
in graduate school.
Ah, okay. This school definitely did not exist then.
Mhm.
I got hired for a private school that had only been open for 2 years,
Mhm.
and it was a really eye-opening year
Mhm.
because it was flying the plane and building it at the same time.
Mhm. Mm.
But at the same time, whatever we wanted to do with the kids, money was never an object.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that you don't always have in a public school. You have so many budgetary limitations, and you are told to make wine out of lemons.
I'm just
And
thinking of Abbott Elementary, the TV show.
yes, yes, I love that show. And I can attest, even though I work in private schools, a lot of the things are just a school thing in general.
Mhm.
It's really on brand. And it's hard, like when you want to give kids everything and you want to teach them everything and you want to say yes to them all the time, and to have to say no to them because of something like we don't have the money for that, or we can't fit that into our schedule because we have to prepare you for a state exam
Mm.
that has no impact on who you are as a student and yet everything to do in a public school.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of what kept me in private.
Mhm.
I've never had to teach to a test. I've never had to worry about You know, is my student going to get to the next grade because they scored a 2 on an exam?
Mhm,
My job has never been in question because of kids' performance on a standardized test.
mhm,
So I think that's what's kept me in private.
mhm.
I mean, I'm not going to retire with a pension, but
But oh boy, you're gonna have so many more like richer experiences
yes,
in working in all these places.
yes. In my
So
mind, maybe I'll write a book
there you go.
of everything,
So
along with my Rosita la Osita
oh,
children's
that
book.
has to be a book. That has to be a book.
Yeah.
Um, how do you call your mom? Mommy, mama?
Um, Depends. Ma.
So Inez,
Or no, mommy.
Inez, mommy, don't worry, Inez will be fine. If she survived moving to California and then back during the pandemic, well, to New York City, and then survived the pandemic and reinvented herself all these times, she'll be fine. Don't worry.
Thank you. I'm gonna tell her that.
Okay, well, Inez, anything else you would like to add to this conversation before we part ways and say goodbye?
No, I thank you for your patience because I know that my stories are like all
No, it's beautiful and it's very clear.
okay. I'm gonna tell my husband that too because he says my stories are always like a little too windy. I'm like, but they always find their way.
Yes, that's the important thing. Um, I'm trying to remember who was it that told me, maybe a professor in college. I was kind of saying the same way that when I tell stories, I go here and there and everywhere, but that's the way I communicate. And then she was like, and like, who decided that that's the wrong way? There's one way that it's very linear and very logical. Yeah, that's one way. Yours is another, and it's not good or bad. It just is. And I was like, oh, I like that. I like that.
I'm
So,
gonna take that too.
bueno, Inés, pues nada más. Ay, I'm switching to Spanish.
No, you can totally switch.
No, because then depending on what language we use is the type of viewers your
Ah,
interview will get. Not everybody who watches in Spanish understands English, and not everybody who watches in English understands Spanish. So anyway, final reminder, now you have to select photos regarding this beautiful flower that we managed to build today. Anything you feel comfortable sharing, just send me those pictures. I'll add them to the interview. And thank you so much for
you're
having said
welcome.
yes. It was a lot of fun. It was so good to see you again.
Yeah.
And one of these days we have, I mean, it's been what, 10, 14,
Mm,
almost 15 years? If we started
mm.
2009? Well, let's say 2010. It's been 14 years. Oh, Maya's age.
Oh yeah. She's the litmus of how long
Yes.
it's been.
So we have to go to New York City and visit you so you can meet her in person. She's gonna be
Yes.
like, who is this woman in this that says she knows me from the moment I was in your womb?
It's
But
true.
then she'll find out. Her unconscious will recognize your voice and your laughter. Thank you
Hopefully.
so much.
You're
Have a
welcome.
beautiful day.
You too.
Recover from your COVID soon.
Yes.
Well, that's another weird thing, no? That we talked about the pandemic, and then now you got COVID last week, but you're here. Everything is fine.
Yep.
Everybody's vaccinated. We're surviving this. So times change.
They do.
Bueno,
But
have
our
a
friendship
beautiful
will stay
day.
forever.
Huh?
I said, but our friendship will probably stay forever.
Yes. Yes. So let's see if I remember the phrase I couldn't say at the beginning. Let's hope that our friendship continues to stand the test of time. I did.
You got it.
Thank you so much, Inéz. Say hello
Bye.
to your husband.
I will. Say hi
Bye.
to your family as well too.
Yes, I will.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.